Okay, so here's the the solution to the homework question number 1. Given triangle ABC, we're looking at point A, 3, 1, point B, -3, -3, and point C, -2, 2. What I've done is I've plotted points A, B, and C, just kind of giving a rough sketch, and then I've also put in the midpoints D, E, and F just to make it a little bit easier to follow. Before I begin the problem, I think it's best to find the midpoint of each side of the triangle, and you can see that work here, and you can pause it as you go. And then I also find it helpful to find not only the slope of each side, but also the slope that would be perpendicular to each given side. Okay. So given that information, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find the equation of median CD. So given points C and D, what do? So the first step is to find the slope. Once we find the slope, we're going to plug in the slope and then choose a point. In this case, I think 0, -1 is the easier of the 2 points. So I plug in a value for x and plug in a value for y, and I would solve that for b. And that would be my first equation. The second median is I'm going to use points B and points F. This one gets a little bit messier because we have a fraction to deal with, but essentially the process is the same. First step is to find the slope of segment BF, and you can see the work here arrives at 9/7. And then the same process, we're going to plug in the slope, and then we're going to choose one point. In this case, I'm going to plug in point B. So if I plug in -3 for x and -3 for y and solve it, I would get 6/7 for b. The equation for median BF is what you see here. Okay. I would then write it and solve the system. So when I set the two equations equal to each other, what I'm going to do is multiply both sides by 14 to clear the fraction. You can see how I solve it through. The common factor here is 13. 13 goes into both. And then once I have a value for x, I plug that back into one of the original equations and solve for y. So the centroid would be -2/3, 0. Okay. For the circumcenter, when we go to find the circumcenter, what we're going to do is we're going to find the perpendicular bisector of AC. So first we found the midpoint, we found the slope that's perpendicular to AC. I plug in the slope and the x and the y value of the midpoint, and then I solve for b. So my equation here would be y equals 5x minus 1. I would also go ahead and find the perpendicular bisector of segment AB. Again, we already calculated the midpoint and the perpendicular slope to AB, plug in the information, and get my equation. Same idea here. I now have a system of equations. I would go ahead and set them equal to each other and solve. To clear the fraction, I would multiply both sides by 2, and then I would get a circumcenter of 0, -1. The second question on the homework gives us a triangle ABC with points at -5, 0, -3, 3, and -2, 2. Process is the same. I sketch it out. I put in the midpoints. I go ahead and solve for each of the midpoints. And then I also went ahead and found the perpendicular slopes to each of the sides. Okay, doing the work up front will save you some time. Centroid, I chose to find the median CD. So I have my 2 points. First step is find the slope. The slope that I get for segment CD is going to be 7/4. I plug in the slope and a point. In this case, I plugged in point C. Okay, get my equation. For my second median, I'm going to choose AE. So I have my 2 points. Find the slope. Once I have the slope, what I'll do is I'll plug in point A. So point A had an x value of -5, a y value of 0, and I get my equation. I have my system, set it equal to each other. The LCM I'm going to multiply by is 20. I would go ahead and solve that through. At the end here, 13 goes into both when you simplify your fraction. And again here, I would multiply, when I plug it back in, I would multiply both sides by 15 to clear the fraction. My centroid is -10/3, -1/3. For the circumcenter, I'm going to find the perpendicular bisector of segment AC. plug in the slope and the given point, the given midpoint here. I would clear the fraction by multiplying by 4, and I get my equation. For the second perpendicular bisector, I'm going to use segment AB, so the midpoint of AB and the slope that's perpendicular to AB. Plug in that information, I would multiply both sides of the equation by 6 to clear the fraction, and I will get my final equation. I have my system. I set them equal to each other. My LCM is going to be 12. When I do that, it clears my fraction. To simplify this fraction again, 13 goes into both. My x value is -5/2. If I was to plug that back in, I would get a y value of -1/2. So my circumcenter is -5/2, comma, -1/2.